How can sound create meaningful experiences of data? How can we preserve local identity and history emotionally? To reinterpret these themes and make them accessible, we can augment reality with sound.
The London Borough of Lewisham is an area of shared experiences and rich cultural activity. The social issues surrounding it initiated a hunt for data that we could interpret into expressive and engaging experiences for people to interact with through AR. Gentrification became a natural point of focus due to the volumes of workable data that we found. With such a sensitive topic, we as students initially felt obliged to do our part in resolving and repairing the student-resident rift, and this turned into a way to educate people about gentrification, aiming this at gentrified specifically and not the gentrified.
After reflection, we found that without real solutions to gentrification, we aren't doing anything to prevent or reduce the effects of it. Instead, we were trivialising it down to a collection of abstract sounds, and we were losing sight of our original intention, when in actuality we needed to advance a broader scope of data collection.
Our project moved into preserving local histories and culture as a way to record an area that is constantly changing and evolving through buzzwords like development and regeneration.
So, if people moving into an area were to learn about its rich history and diversity, it would naturally go against the ideology of gentrification without having to focus on it. We wanted to remain neutral, so we selected data that comes from all areas of culture and society.
What can information like political party hold, student population and Wikipedia data say about an area?
Using Margaret Macmillan Park as an established thoroughfare between New Cross and Deptford, a bridge between Goldsmiths University and a long-loved market space, the path was viable for an anchored, augmented reality intervention that people could casually access and involve themselves in.
We took the approach when assembling an app to keep the demographic as wide as possible, as we understood that the majority of users would be younger people that have a greater access to and are more adept with current technologies, especially AR. So it was more important to us to appeal to a broader audience than those who are almost guaranteed to use it anyway.
Lewisham, Who Do You Think You are, is an auditory experience envisioned through an app interface for users to navigate between layers of data-generative sound.
User will tap through the icons in the app to hit different dataset that we have sonified.
As users move around in space with their device, the sounds decrease and increase in volume at certain intersectional points by proximity to their anchored locations.
We included an information tab to explain the process so that the sounds are not inaccessibly abstract. Sound creates the experience, but users also need to be able to view the datasets in order to understand and interact with what is being presented to them.
So, how exactly did we create these sounds? One of the datasets we translated was the physical landscape, immortalised just as it exists now through music.
The archiving of a space's history through music cannot be done without taking the physical layout of the local landscape into consideration. London's skyline and streets morph, stretch and grow constantly, meaning that taking the shape of the area into consideration was equally important to more obviously emotional data.
From scans of the park, we made a musical score based on the shape of the park's infrastructure. This was done through recreating the physical shapes of the park and following them to create rhythm and sound. When the scan is put behind the score, the shape of the park can be identified and translated back.
Inspiration was taken from experimental interpretations of music, such as John Cage's scores or musical scores that have been produced based on Kandinsky's paintings. The sheet music is often filled with geometric patterns and shapes to represent notes or indications about the musical piece, and are often created based on visual concepts.
Scores were made based on the topography and physical elements of Margaret Macmillan Park. We sketched out an outline of the park and translated the geometric patterns and lines into musical scores. We then gave these to a musician who interpreted them into sound. We repeated this process again, based on data of plans to build skyscrapers in different areas of London, as well as the Nunhead, and Peckham regeneration plans.
The LiDAR scan of the space in order to understand its geometry further and to make it easier to anchor digital objects to it. Then we imported it to Reality Composer in Xcode and placed the sounds in relation to it, using the original scan as an anchor point for the app, which can recognize it and set the scene accordingly. Augmented reality is primarily a visual medium, and we wanted to subvert it by creating a sound-heavy experience in order to make it more accessible. We placed the Reality Composer file into Xcode and added descriptions and information to the app to complement our AR experience. Therefore, the app ended up being a complementary way of exploring and re-experiencing a familiar but never really noticed space, and it could be used to draw attention to more spaces around us.
This app is a culmination of showcasing what data surrounds an area which by itself would be inaccessible and out of context. When we reinterpret them into auditory experiences, we hope that they will become emotionally weighted and interactive and mean more than just numbers and words on unengaging spreadsheets. This app would hopefully make users reflect on their surroundings, understanding that it is an entangled network of culture, history, people and places, all through the vehicle of sound. We created this app as a framework for future sound interpretations of the multitude of datasets that could be collected from Lewisham, but this could also be scaled up to a wider, interconnected group of cities, towns and countries. But what specifically could we explore more?
We want to look at how we can compare data, like the student population in London with how New Cross Road in Lewisham is changing. Presenting these two datasets alongside each other questions why we have such an impact on how the university's local high street looks.
A history of Deptford lifted from Wikipedia is uninspiring. Getting local people involved as a source of data will paint a real picture of the area's past. How can we avoid the internet and impersonal and unemotional dataset in the future to create social history and true representation of the now?
So, how do we get people to actively engage with an intangible intervention? We could involve physical objects and handouts, like a poster or a pamphlet, to create a tangible crossover that encourages people to use the AR app and understand how this technology can show the world what makes an area like Lewisham what it is today.